Welcome to Inclusive Expat. There's the version people talk about, and then there's the real one. This is a show about immigration, family, and what actually happens when big systems meet real lives. I'm Sita, and today we're here to meet the family and talk about our neurodivergent brains. Why don't you all go ahead and introduce yourselves?
So I'll go first. I'm Marcos. Sita and I will be on our 20th year anniversary this year, and I'm really excited to be on the podcast and learn while you guys learn. So how about you, Thea?
I'm Theo. I'm the oldest here. This is my fiance, who's been added to the neurodivergent family.
I'm Sam.
That's Sam. I was the first one to be diagnosed as neurodivergent and started everyone going, "No, wait, me too," and realizing we were all like that and not just me.
I'm Reese. I'm the middle child. I use they, them pronouns. And I think I first got diagnosed at about 14.
Hi, I'm Rowan. I use they, he pronouns. I first got diagnosed in about seventh grade, and my most recent diagnosis was my autism diagnosis, which I got last year.
So, today I want to talk about our family and why this podcast matters to me and why I wanted to do this. We're not a bunch of experts. We're just a bunch of regular people who are living our regular lives and we're navigating the world as neurodivergent people. So, this is our first episode, and I just want us to introduce ourselves and get to know us. You don't need our diagnoses unless we feel like sharing them or credentials because we really don't have them. But what we do have is lived experience. We're going to talk about how our brains work. We're going to talk about what people often misunderstand about us, how we mask, how we regulate, and what it's like to be in a family where everyone's brain works a little bit differently. We all have a different flavor of neurospicy. So, this conversation is meant to be imperfect. It's meant to be human. It's meant to be consent led. Talk about whatever you feel comfortable talking about and sharing. Neurodivergence is a way of being, it's not a problem to fix. And what happens when we're high masking or late identified, and what happens when we have to regulate ourselves, each other, what happens when we misunderstand one another, and how we repair inside a family. So, our lived experience is why this exists. And the fact that we took our whole family and uprooted us from everything we knew in the United States and moved to a fresh new country that some of us have never even been to, um, and have been here just 6 months, we're just starting to get the language around what this very challenging experience in some ways and very rewarding has been like for us. So, if you've ever lived in a world that wasn't built for your brain or your family's brains, then you're not alone. And that's why we're here. That's why we're starting. So, I want to talk to each of you about what your brain is like. Okay. So, how would you describe your brain to someone who's never met you? Anyone can answer this one.
Complicated.
Complex was the first word I thought of for myself.
Yeah,
There's a
just
lot of layers.
many layers, contradicting layers.
It's nuanced. It's not, I mean, I know it's hard for the autistic ones here, but it is very nuanced. It's not black and white. Even though we may see the world in more black and white terms, the way our brains work is very much not that way. There's all different kinds of layers, and depending on how you approach it, you could hit a different color, different layer, that sort of thing.
If I were to describe my brain to somebody who's never met me, I'd say it's constant noise. I think that some people don't realize that neurodivergent brains never shut off. It's always chatter, 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 chatter all the time.
Yeah. I learned that as a fairly young mother, and it was something that he had to point out for me because I regularly got frustrated that Theo struggled with 3 steps in a row. And I would give him some kind of instructions and he would go off and do step 1, and by the time step 1 was finished, he had 0 recollection of what was supposed to be happening for step 2 and step 3. And it wasn't that he wasn't listening to me. It wasn't that he wasn't paying attention. It wasn't that he was disregarding me. And it wasn't that he couldn't remember things. It was really the amount of activity that was happening in his brain was so incredibly high that he was already 100 steps away from whatever step 2 was, because that's how fast his brain moved. And this one pointed it out for me. Marcos, thank you very much for that. Anyone else want to describe their brain?
I think that if I could describe my brain, it would be it's very complicated to explain, but there's a lot of layers, as Theo said, and a lot of impulses. A lot of the time when I feel comfortable and safe, I have more impulses, such as biting people. I find comfort when I can be myself around those who love me, and when I can come out of my shell. If I could describe my brain to someone who didn't know me super well, I would be like, "It's a little strange up there." Let's be real. It's both a
Ah,
strength and weakness.
little strange up there.
And, as parents of multi neurodivergent children, it's required a greater level of flexibility. I can't read a book about, okay, like, parenting 101 because, neurodivergent brain doesn't fit in these books because everybody's brain is a little bit different. Is a little, the way you process information is different. The way you want to, the way you accept rewards or consequences are different. Like there's so many differences. Um, but being a parent at those types of brains that it can pose. I don't want to say challenges because while it is different, it's also very rewarding as well because I love all the differences in your brains and the differences in the way you see the world and the way you process the world.
Great way to put it. My only issue with what you said is that you just called me flexible. I don't think that's entirely accurate. When did you first realize your brain worked differently? Anyone have any thoughts about that?
In our first couple months of dating, I was talking about my neurodivergencies and how I have autism and ADHD and like how I'm struggling with it. And you were like, "Yeah, I kind of relate to that, but not really. I don't really think I have any of that. I don't think I'm neurodivergent." And I was like, "You fit in really well with my family. So I hate to break it to you, you're probably neurodivergent." And you were like, "Oh no."
So I knew I was different,
Mhm,
but I didn't really know labels because I grew up in a very uh isolated area uh of like a very small county. And there wasn't a lot of resources about it.
mhm. And you're always just weird and not diagnosed.
Yeah.
I really connect with that, Sam, because I always embrace sort of being the weird kid. And I did. I love the word weird and quirky. I just thought I was just such an individual. I thought, I'm just going to put it all out there, I would say. And I realized that now I look back at that and realize some of my putting it all out there was my first experience with unmasking. Yeah. We could spend the whole episode talking about unmasking, but I have a
Yeah.
question that I want to ask Rowan next. What is something that people often misunderstand about you?
I think people often misunderstand that sometimes I don't grasp onto things as quickly as others do, or I grasp onto them really fast and people think it's strange, honestly. I feel like before my diagnosis, I was very confused on why I was so different, why kids picked on me in school, especially in elementary school. And hold on, I'm just trying to process real quick. I think in getting that clarity of that diagnosis, I discovered a lot of things about myself and ways that I can cope.
I know for me, I saw a lot of self acceptance that was really born out of that diagnosis for you. That before the diagnosis, you experienced a lot of blaming yourself for all sorts of things. And once you realized how your brain worked, you're a lot more generous to yourself and accepting of yourself. Would you say that's true?
I do agree with that. And I also think that with diagnoses comes different perspectives from other people, where sometimes people just see you as a label when you have a diagnosis, and it can make it difficult to tell people because you're worried that they're going to judge you for having a certain label that you identify with that helps you.
Mm,
And so something that I'm getting more comfortable with is telling people, "Hey, I'm autistic and here are some things that I struggle with." And I like clear communication because that is something that I'm working on.
that's great. That's great.
Can I expound
Thanks.
on that?
I would love to hear from you, Reese.
I feel like I'm pretty different from Rowan in that sense. I really like labels. I find a lot of comfort in them, especially since I've known my neurodivergent labels a lot longer than Rowan has. So I feel like it's something that I tend to lead with these sorts of things because if somebody's going to judge me or not want to be friends with me because of this, I want to know that in the very beginning. I don't want to get into a friendship with someone or any type of relationship and then them judge me because my brain just works the way it does. So I think that's how we differ.
I understand where you're coming from.
That's a great point, Reese. Thinking about realizing that your brain was different, being misunderstood, I know that's something that all of us have experienced. I want to go to you next, Theo, and ask what kind of environment helps you thrive?
I do best in very structured environments. Like, I excel really well in school because school is very clear. You go to class, you get exact assignments, read these many chapters, do this exam, and write a 3-page paper about this book. And everything is given to you in such a structured way that it makes it a lot easier to function in environments like that.
So how does that work when you did something like this, moved away from everything you know and everyone you know to a completely different country? Like that seems the opposite of where you thrive.
That's true. It was very dysregulating. Like, everything was different, everything was change.
We could make a whole podcast about that. What do you think?
Wow, we could.
So let's think about coping and masking, and let's talk a little bit more about, growing up in a system that's not really designed for neurodivergent brains. Reese, I'd like to ask you, what does masking look like in your real life?
Masking can look very different depending on where I am. I'm very extroverted, so I'd say that I'm kind of like I shapeshift my personality depending on who I'm with. I'm a people pleaser and a perfectionist. So I kind of, if people are talking in a certain way, I talk that way too. If people are cursing more, I curse more too. Like I lean more into other people's personalities. And so I definitely think that's made me pick up certain traits from certain people, being able
Mm,
to change myself to be the version of myself I think people want to see. The way I talk to my teachers, the way I talk to my friends, the way I talk to my family, the way I talk to my extended family, all different.
I think you bring up a good point that different environments require different responses. Sometimes masking is about trying to contain that overwhelm, that can come on so easily. Rowan, what helps you regulate when things feel overwhelming?
I have a lot of different coping skills for specific things. For my anxiety, I tend to do activities where I feel like I have control to take over my anxiety. So when I
Oh.
feel so out of control and overwhelmed, I'm just like, I need to do something where I have complete control. And so something that I like to do for my anxiety specifically is I like to arrive to events early so I can be like, This is me mentally preparing. This is how I can take control of the situation and make sure that I'm prepared for what is to come next instead of things getting hectic for me in my brain and in my environment. And some other coping skills that I like to use is art or singing. I really like to draw. It's one of my biggest passions, and singing really helps with regulating myself. When I'm really dysregulated, I can hum or sing, and it really brings me back to this like calm energy.
It sounds like you have a whole toolbox full of different things to try for your overwhelm. That's really fantastic.
And it all simple things such as fidget toys, something you can keep on your body. It can be really small, but make a significant difference when you are feeling yourself starting to get dysregulated.
Yeah, great point. I find that I will fiddle my necklace or fiddle my ring or fiddle my keychain, something like that, even if I don't have something with me to fiddle with.
Uh-huh.
I want to go ahead and talk a little bit more about our family as a system, as a whole, and how we sort of navigate all of these different needs that we all have as neurodivergent individuals. And Marcos, I have a question for you. What's the hardest part of being in a family where everyone's brain works differently?
I mean, it kind of goes back to what Reese was talking about earlier. I mean, we're doing that code switching. It's almost like a parenting code switch, right? Like I can't talk to any of my children or even my wife in the same manner because they're going to react different ways. Like just this evening, we had a discussion with Rowan where Sita and Rowan were bumping edges, and I said, "Wait a minute, let me go around a different way," and we were able to resolve it like almost immediately. But it was because I had that code and I picked up what was going on. So there's a lot of that that goes on, and so I feel like it's having that flexibility. I know it's a tough word. Having that flexibility to, think outside of yourself. It's not just about like what's going to work for me. I have to think like if I'm talking to Theo, I need to understand like what's going to motivate him. What am I going to say that's going to make him upset? Like I need to be careful about that too, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
so I could say something to Reese and Reese is going to laugh about it, but I say the same thing to Theo and he might be upset. So it's that ability to really kind of recognize it, but then, respect it as well. Like you're kind of old school taught it's my way. I'm the authority figure. And with neurodivergent children, you just can't be that way. Like it's not going to end up anywhere great. You're going to hate your kids are going to hate you, right? Like, there's nothing good's going to come of that way.
I'm glad that's not how we wanted to parent. So that's great news.
I mean, it's the same thing, right? Like, I don't need to love you the way I want to be loved. I need to love you the way you want to be loved. And it works with everybody that you'll meet.
Neurodivergent love languages.
Yeah.
Got it. You said something really profound there as you were explaining that situation from earlier. And I know that I'm definitely guilty of being totally oblivious to the tone and only communicating the context. Here's the context. I'm sharing the context. And I'm not hearing the tone at all. And sort of went around the way of solving that problem, which kind of answered my next question, which was how do you solve miscommunication and conflict? And you were able to recognize that I had gone oblivious to the tone and kind of helped me communicate what I was trying to communicate, and it was really helpful.
Yeah, no, you have to be able to handle those miscommunications and just like understanding, especially when you have someone neurodivergent who can tend to see things in very black and white terms, that if you talk in grays, they're just not going to get it. They're like, I don't know, it's black or it's white. I don't know what this gray is you're talking about.
Mm,
So if I want to spend all this time in between the levels, it's like, almost everyone in this call has said, like, I need that clear communication. Like, I
mhm.
need you to tell me exactly what it is, and that's going to help me to get it. Um, And
Yeah.
so I think that's been a big part of learning how to be a better parent, better husband,
Yeah.
a better friend.
Yeah.
I I think that empathy plays a huge role being a neurodivergent family, where we have to put each other in each other's shoes and really understand what's going on so we can cultivate a safe space for everybody. So, really using our empathetic, wise mind really helps us to be able to communicate.
I also
Mm.
think that it's really important that we have a system. Like when we siblings are fighting, the parents will be like, okay, stop what you're doing. This person's gonna talk first. You're gonna listen. You're gonna reflect back. You're gonna say, is that all? And then the other person will get their turn. And I think that since we've had that system since we were little, we're all very good at it by now. And I think that it has helped us through a lot of miscommunications because we can do this back and forth where neither of us are understanding each other, or we can stop and work on our communication and listen to each other. So I feel like
Mm.
it's important that we have that system in place.
Yeah, that's a great point, Reese. I love what you had to say about that. I wanted to ask, what do you want people to know about neurodivergent families?
Neurodivergent families are built different. um, we're strange and wonderful. It's it can be hard sometimes because sometimes I'm fidgeting, but my sibling doesn't like the way that I'm fidgeting because that's touching their neurodivergency. And yeah, that's a phrase that we have in our family. It's touching me can mean that something is touching my neurodivergency or like touching my brain the wrong way. So it's like sometimes we need to use our neurodivergent love languages, but sometimes we also need space from each other. And sometimes we need to recognize when another person is struggling. And it's like really important for neurodivergent families. I think knowledge is important. We need to know that we're neurodivergent in order to cope with our neurodivergence and make sure that we're not butting heads all the time. Because I think that the more I learn about not only my neurodivergence, but my family's neurodivergence, the more I'm able to communicate and help them, and they can help me. And the more that we can work cohesively as a household.
Thank you. Anything that any of you have any thoughts around, what do you want people to stop assuming about neurodivergent people?
Assuming that just because someone is a higher functioning person most times means they're a higher functioning person all the time. Like, there are different levels of being on the spectrum. That's why it's called that. But even someone who functions better like me can still have an ever loving meltdown about something small. Just because I have them less often or I can regulate more easily doesn't mean those moments aren't also there.
And that doesn't make it small. It's
Mhm.
obviously something big for you, but important that you know that about your brain.
Uh, my biggest problem is with stereotypes. Like OCD people like me are clean freaks and germaphobes, but if anything, Rowan's more of a germaphobe than I am. And not all autistic people are 5-year-old boys who are obsessed with trains. As an AFAB person, it's harder for me to get diagnosed. Like, I was born female, there's differences, and we have to recognize that depending on who you are and where you come from, and even the country you come from, like, it can be much harder to get that diagnosis, and you will struggle for more of your life to figure out who you are.
Grace, thank you. Well, I just want to say that you are all amazing. I love you all and really appreciate you joining me and being part of this with me. This is a journey. This is not all of the answers, but this is real. And if this felt familiar, then you're welcome here. Thank you, Reese, Rowan, Marcos, Theo, and Sam.